but we're going to go ahead and get started with the program. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us. My name is Skye Griffith, and I am the founding manager of the Justice Education Initiative at the Claremont Colleges. I have the privilege of moderating this amazing event today. So thank you again for joining us. Please allow me to introduce Dr. Alan Curtis, who is the president of the Eisenhower Foundation.
Just call me Alan. Thank you, Skye, and thank you to Claremont and Cornell, Georgetown, Northwestern, Pittsburgh for this convening, and to the Mellon Foundation for its financial support. Reginald Dwayne Betts has just won a MacArthur Genius Award for his work on the humanity and rights of incarcerated people. His book of poetry titled Felon is such a powerful message. But all of you here today, in my mind, deserve Genius Awards for healing the disorder of our divided society. Disorders prevailed over the 1960s. Disorders in Detroit and Newark and Los Angeles, Chicago and Washington, and all across America, over 150 cities. Whites tended to call the 60s disturbances riots. People of color called them protests. The same differences in framing hold true today. In response to the 60s protests, President Lyndon Johnson formed the bipartisan Kerner Commission, which concluded that the underlying cause was, quote, white racism. The commission advised it is time to make good the promises of American democracy to all citizens, urban and rural, white and black, Spanish surname, American Indian, and every minority group. Today, this is just as true, and it is still time to do that. The Eisenhower Foundation recently released its 50-year update of the Kerner Commission titled Healing Our Divided Society, and we concluded that America has made little progress in reducing racial injustice, economic inequality, and poverty, and in many ways, America has gone backwards. So, for example, in 1968, the Kerner Commission extensively criticized police, and zero tolerance, stop and frisk policing against people of color has since proven to fail over many decades. About 200,000 people were in jail or prison at the time of the Kerner Commission in 1968. Today, because of the crime legislation of the 1980s and because of the crime legislation of the 1990s, as we all know, the prison industrial complex now holds over 2.2 million people, and they are disproportionately people of color. Mass incarceration since the Kerner Commission then has become the present iteration of slavery and Jim Crow. Since the Kerner Commission, deep poverty, income inequality, wealth inequality, and public school segregation all have increased. White national movements have strengthened, as we saw in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the Capitol building in Washington was invaded on January 6th. The pandemic has made things disproportionately worse for people of color and the truly disadvantaged. Nonetheless, over the last 50 years, since the Kerner Commission, the nation has built up considerable evidence on economic, public health, education, civil rights, housing, voting rights, and criminal justice policies that work. Keynesian living wage investments in average citizens and the poor work. The Affordable Health Care Act and the vaccine work. Head Start and equity in public school finance work. Housing mobility models work and can lead to school integration. There is great potential for de-siloed, place-based co-targeting of what works in truly disadvantaged neighborhoods across the nation. Reduced prison populations in California, New York, New Jersey have worked. Your justice and prison education models work. There is solid evidence-based ex-offender reintegration programming that one can cite as working, like the Minnesota Comprehensive Reentry Program, the Safer Foundation programs in Chicago, the Lansing Street run by my good friend Mimi Silbert in San Francisco and the Center for Employment Opportunities in New York. In spite of the unfortunate lack of progress in Congress on federal police reform legislation, there already are proven existing evidence-based models in which indigenous nonprofit community organizations partner with police, but as equals. For decades, the Eisenhower Foundation has replicated such models in diverse locations, from Puerto Rico and New Hampshire to South Carolina and San Francisco. The evidence is that such community police partnerships hold promise for simultaneously reducing crime, reducing fear, diverting youth from the juvenile justice system, solving public security problems in democratic ways at the grassroots, increasing trust by residents in police in poor urban neighborhoods of color, sensitizing police to the people they serve, reducing violence by police, and changing police culture. This is about community and police working more closely together in ways that both Black Lives Matter and progressive police chiefs can agree. Yet, as we have traveled across the nation, we have found that the public does not, for the most part, understand we know a lot about what works, and that policy needs to be based on evidence and science, not on dogma and supposition. We also have learned a great deal about what doesn't work, like neoliberalism and willful indifference to the unequal distribution of prosperity. Most of all, what doesn't work is false 1980s rhetoric on government being the problem. Now, with the pandemic having made everything disproportionately worse for people of color and impoverished Americans, we need to scale up what works and scale down what doesn't work. It is time to seize the day, renegotiate the social contract, restructure basic power equations, and change the rules of the game. The goal is not to get back to normal. Normal has been the problem in America. We have, in fact, already reversed that false 1980s rhetoric on diminishing the role of government. 2020 hosted the largest expansion of federal financial activity in American history, and we are continuing in 2021. Yet in order to seize the day, we still need what the 1968 Kerner Commission called new will from the American people. What is the use of evidence if there is no will to take action? How then can we create new public will in our divided society? That is one of the most important questions at a time when our democracy is being threatened. So today we challenge you and your institutions to push the envelope, not just on criminal justice solutions, but on solutions to all of the interrelated dilemmas identified by the original Kerner Commission. We challenge you to cross-endorse and strengthen alliances with Black Lives Matter and with Bishop William Barber's continuation of Reverend Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign, which was designed to create multiracial coalitions among the poor, the working class, and the middle class. That will help create new will. We challenge you to work with the Mellon Foundation and others to expand the number of universities with high-quality prison education programs. Institutions of higher learning, in my mind, are not doing nearly enough in their outreach to the communities where they are located. We challenge you to redouble advocacy for genuine police, prosecutor, and prison reform. That will help create new will. We challenge you to advocate for the federal infrastructure, education, health, family, and anti-poverty legislation now being debated in Congress. That will help create new will. We challenge you to advocate for the federal voting rights legislation now being proposed, and to advocate for the elimination or modification of the Senate filibuster. That will create new will. Regardless of the long-run fate of the federal voting rights legislation, We challenge you to get out the vote in 2022 and 2024. That will help create new will. Responding to the Kerner Commission's extensive criticism of the media, we challenge you to advocate for regulatory action against media platforms that push addicted users deeper and deeper into their own bubbles, intensifying division, hatred, misinformation, and policy based on dogma rather than evidence. That will help create new will. We challenge you to join the Mellon Foundation and the Eisenhower Foundation in reimagining how grassroots nonprofit organizations can better utilize the visual and the performing arts to advance their missions, change American culture, and so create new will. And we challenge you, finally, to remember with Langston Hughes and Reginald Betts how long the dream has been deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Perhaps that dream just sags like a heavy load. Or, my friends, does it just explode? I thank you for giving me this time, and now I look forward to our panel dialogue.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Curtis. Once again, for those of you that are joining us now, my name is Tyee Griffith, and I am the founding manager of the Justice Education Initiative at the Claremont Colleges. I am here with my colleagues from the Prison Education Programs at Cornell and Georgetown Universities and the Northwestern Prison Education Program. In cooperation with the Eisenhower Foundation, we present 50 years after the Kerner Commission. How can institutions of higher learning enhance prison education, expand community outreach, and inspire the new will needed to eliminate poverty and racial inequality? Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. We have Skye Williamson, who is a graduate of the Cornell Prison Education Program, a leader and executive in the fight against criminal injustice, and a program associate at Galaxy Give. He is a dedicated activist with a bachelor's degree in mathematics, who was granted executive clemency on February 1st, 2021, after serving 25 years in prison. We also have Joel Castón, who is a student at the Georgetown Prison Scholars Program. He is the first person in the country of the District of Columbia to win an elected office while incarcerated, and currently serves as DC's Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner. We also have Maria Garza, who is a graduate of Northwestern's Prison Education Program, a formerly incarcerated restorative justice practitioner and service dog trainer. She is planning to pursue her master's in theological studies. And finally, we have Yusuf Pierce, who was the valedictorian of Pitzer College's first cohort of incarcerated students in the Inside Out program to receive a bachelor's degree in organizational studies. He is also the author of a children's book, and he intends to pursue a PhD. His goal is to travel around the world, specifically in West Africa, and look at the rehabilitative programs that they have for incarcerated folks. Well, welcome to all of our esteemed panelists. I want to go ahead and begin just by letting you all know that you can read the full bios for each of our panelists in the chat. Thank you so much for that. I would like to begin by asking my very first question. First question, how can institutions of higher learning enhance prison education, expand outreach into the community, and address the priorities of Kerner and healing? So really eliminating poverty, racial inequality, and injustice. And I'd like to hand it off to Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria. Welcome, everybody. Well, one of the things that I would say, that I would like to see universities focus on is the transition inside prison education and how it transitions outside into reentry and transformation for the returning citizen. I have worked with a couple universities here in Illinois that have different type of reentry, and they differ, and it is important because yes, we're getting the education in there, but we're, you know, behind the walls, we're the ones who see each other. We're the ones who are living it. And to reintegrate into society and how society views us underneath an umbrella that is so powerful, you know, do they really see that, you know, besides what's on paper or us having to speak for it? So I think it is important that it's not just looked at as in-prison education, but how we are transferring it after, you know, while, you know, some inmates have long-term, some of them, as we see in the state of Illinois, it's going on every day. Clemencies are being reviewed, things like that. You never know when the blessing's gonna come. And then to have to now look at where our education is going to go post-incarceration. And again, healing, trauma, reintegration, all of that is important, that I feel that if the university is making the effort to give us this higher learning, to build us up to be productive citizens, coming out and not being viewed as the person that committed this crime many, many years back, there has to be some level of support in that transition. It shouldn't end the moment we walk out.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. I want to ask the same question to Joel. How can institutions of higher learning enhance prison education, expand outreach into the community, and address the priorities of Kerner?
Yes, great question. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for having me on this panel today. I want to attack that question threefold. First, I want to start about looking at, even though we speak a lot about reentry, I want to first look at no entry, which I believe triumphs reentry. Institutions, higher education, should invest more on the front end. We have enough data, understand that people from marginalized communities, these disenfranchised communities, are the ones who matriculate into the carceral spaces. So we are intentional in making sure that there's a presence, a real pathway to higher education. We can stop people coming in from the very beginning. So I want to focus on turn off the faucet. Now, while we are in the inside, we need more of the inside out model that Georgetown University is currently doing here and other universities doing in other institutions. What I discovered in my personal capacity was that first we did labeling. We want to make sure that an incarcerated pupil is the same as a non-incarcerated pupil. They're both students. And seeing us as students first, recognizing our humanity, what happened was we didn't have on two hats. I'm in the inside, I get a different curriculum than someone on the outside, the same curriculum. And what we did was, here in this particular institution, we had the inside residents, male and female, which we had both co-ed, which was, from my understanding, the first that happened in the nation that we had both inside male and female incarcerated scholars side by side with their outside scholars. And we moved forward with just basically pretty much saying that we're all on the same page. And so with that educational piece right there, we got a new mindset. Now to what my Ms. Maria said before I spoke, and I like what she was saying, having that safety net when we come out. We don't want to come out without having the resources in places. So I think that if the institutions are being intentional and making sure that their presence is vital and felt in the inside, but also having the space on like the Pivot program here in Washington, D.C., that when you come home, you're being welcomed into a community that you already knew from the inside. And that way, that person can continue his or her studies, and we know that in the end, that individual return as a productive person. I hope I answered your question.
You're still on mute. We can't hear you. Okay.
Is it not staying unmuted?
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
thank goodness. I was having some major technical difficulties and couldn't take myself put back on mute, but thank you all so much. So I want to ask that exact same question to Yusuf Pierce. So glad you can join us from the inside, Yusuf. So the question is, how can institutions of higher learning enhance prison education, expand outreach into the community, and address the priorities of the Kerner Commission?
Hello, everyone, and I thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me. I think with regard to the question, I think that one of the main ways, from my perspective, that the institution of higher learning can do much better when it comes to people prison education and the work that they're trying to do with educating people who are in prison. I have to speak on the Inside Out program that I've been a part of, that I went through, and the Inside Out program, for people who aren't familiar with it, the Inside Out program is something that was started by a woman named Lori Poplar, and the design is basically that traditional students from universities and colleges in society actually sign up to take classes that are held inside prison institutions like this one here. And so I was introduced to the program about 2 years ago, and I signed up to take classes. And so what happens is we take classes, and the classes are about 20 people, 10 people. Usually they want it to be about half inside students and half outside students. And inside students are, of course, incarcerated students, and outside students are the traditional students in college. And it's just really an amazing program. And I think that the amazingness, well, if that's a word, but well, what happens is it just works twofold, right? And for the incarcerated people, it builds a lot of confidence. It gives a lot of perspective. I think that a lot of times people who are incarcerated, they come from impoverished communities and poor public schools and things like that. And so it hampers your ability to dream, and it hampers your ability to set goals as far as like what you can accomplish. And I think that when you sit next to people who come from different backgrounds and affluent backgrounds, and you start to hear their goals and their things that they want for themselves, and you do work with them, so we do a lot of like group exercises and working together in class and things like that. And you start to realize that you're not as different as you thought, and that there's a lot more that you have in common than not. And it just works really well. I know personally it works really well for your confidence. And the perspective that you have as far as like what's possible for you. And I think also on the flip side, for people who are traditional students who come in, they get the perspective of learning about mass incarceration and different things that they may learn in a sociology class, but they learn it firsthand. And then they go on, after they graduate or continue in their education, they go on with more tangible experience based on coming in here, and then they can go on and do the work and humanize this whole idea of mass incarceration and things like that. So I think that if more colleges and higher institutions were to adopt this method of pedagogy, the Inside Out program, then we would all benefit a lot more for it, because it helps to disrupt this division of, like, good people and bad people, or people who are at risk and things like that. We need to come together and realize that, like I said, we have much more common than we have that are different. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Yusuf. And as you can all see, Yusuf is joining us from inside the California Rehabilitation Center, where we actually currently have a class going on. So thank you so much for that, Yusuf. I would like to ask the exact same question to our final panelist, Skye. Feel free to go ahead and chime in and answer that question.
Yeah, so thanks. I'll start by saying that I have three parts as well. One is about scaling. The second is about the human versus the student. And of course, they're integrated, but they can be handled in different ways behind the wall. And then third is about holding the line of institutional power, which a college and a university really represents. And so I'll start with the first, and the issue of scaling. So I know that there are various prison programs, universities who've bought educational programs inside institutions around the nation. And not one size fits all in terms of how that has to proceed from one institution to negotiating with an administration in their state to getting education up and running. And however, like here in New York State, where I'm from, and I did my time, again, I was just released 8 months ago. And so I'm really quite fresh after 25 years, most of that, which I was in different prison education programs, from those that offered formal degrees to those who just offered one night class a month without credit, So I've really been in the trenches around prison education for decades. And it's for sure that Bard College gets some very important things quite right. And I think that each institution shouldn't be looking to reinvent the wheel, in part because we don't have time to be doing that, right? That if this is about the immediacy and the emergency of impacting people's lives, the quality of life that they live, a system that's been doing injustice for quite a long time, yes, we understand that it's a longitudinal fight, but at the same time, things that we don't have to reinvent, we shouldn't. And so my first bit of advice is that institutions take the pilots and the models that are there of success and work from those pieces, rather than putting energy and investment into doing their own thing. Sometimes doing your own thing has been a waste of resources, time, and we just want to avoid. And so, for example, Bard College does it real well. They have an amazing reentry program. And just to delineate that a little bit, so you know that I'm just talking about very particular things. Prior to being released, they do a reentry workshop, paneling. You develop your resumes, things of that nature that you'll need. We talk about housing and finding housing for you. And many of those services are actually occupied now by previously incarcerated people. The people who live the experience know how important it is to have housing, access to other information, resources. They're the ones running that through the Bard College program. So the institution has empowered people, not just serving incarcerated people, but has empowered them to serve one another. And that sort of infrastructure is one that has great traction and is constantly dynamically being updated, because the needs of the individuals involved are really fluid between the institutional walls as well as outside. So the existing models. My second would be that the human versus the student. Institutions of our legal criminal, I dare not call it, in New York, we try to be really aware of our languages as well as around the nation. And so the criminal justice system is a thing that we're trying not to use. What we have is a legal system. What we have is a criminal legal system. And so the criminal legal system doesn't do well with one, recognizing the stories and the lived experiences of the people that they incarcerated for inordinate amounts of time. But while they're inside, they definitely don't recognize the fact that some of the people who have been offenders are also themselves victims. And for sure, they don't recognize our basic humanity. And so some institution, because the prison is an institution, needs to be at the vanguard of sort of also recognizing our humanity. And so I think the college institution is just one of those institutions that has an opportunity that they shouldn't ignore to bolster the humanity of the individuals inside and make that a priority. And again, through my years of experience, not every college program behind prison walls got that part right. Some of them would capitulate to what is the interests the set of interests by the criminal legal system itself, which is to control, manage, and do layers of dehumanization. And the college institution would, and not their better version, would say that I'm here to just bring education, and these other things are beyond what I'm here to do if you want me to do the education part well. Well, I pose that doing the education part well, it requires you're dealing with the human being, and we are confluence. We are inextricably intertwined with our basic humanity as well as our minds and education. So that would be 2. And briefly for the third is that because universities are institutions, they have to hold the lines of doing what institutions do well. That's reinforce the power that they have, seek to expand the power that they have, and to nurture, to maintain the power that they have. And the criminal legal system does that well in terms of its repression of human beings. When an institution like a university comes in, many of them that are inside have resources. They also need to help hold the line for our humanity. And so that's my 3 things. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Skye. So some of the takeaways just from that question is really universities and institutions of higher learning need to look at the models that have already been created, these successful models, and not recreate the wheel. Also, these models need to include courses that are credit bearing, courses that lead to an actual degree pathway, and then really look at supporting our students as they re-enter into their communities. And then finally, looking at models like the Inside Out model that actually brings outside students and faculty in to learn and to teach alongside of our inside students. So thank you so much for that. For my next question, in your experience, even using your own story, do you have an example of how prison education programs have helped create the new will, right? That movement needed to fight poverty and racial inequality. And if I could go ahead and start with Joel.
Sure. How have they created a new will in fighting poverty? Great question. I think that primarily a lot of us are incarcerated. We find ourselves in incarcerated space because there was an economic component attached to what led us here. We were operating in what I call the black market. And the black market leads to prison, which we know that poverty is caused by the lack of asset ownership. And many people from marginalized communities do not own assets, don't even understand what assets are. So the new will that you spoke about, I like what Skye just left off. I want to piggyback off the point because I think that would kind of use that to pivot to what I think is necessary. Throughout my tenure of incarceration, I came in when I was 18, I'm 45 now, it has been 27 calendar years, and I'm waiting to go home. I've learned more in the inside out model than the 16 facilities I've been in. I've learned more in the inside out model, and it's not about the academics. Oftentimes, many of us, we are well-read, we're well-studied. But when you have the opportunity with a person coming as a teenager and able to interact with members of society on an academic level, that humanizing aspect creates a new will. So what I see in the younger students who are supporting and helping me primarily, it is they see even my campaign now. These individuals have a new will because they have a direct contact of what they are learning in the books. So when my guy Yusef was speaking, I'm like, go Yusef, right? Just the visual. Look at the model where I'm at. I'm still in the inside, for those who don't know. I'm still incarcerated. But this facility has chosen to fully embrace or address and embrace my humanity. That is to say, I'm able to participate in a video like this here, with a suit on, with a tie on Zoom, unsupervised. There's no one in the office here. These things right here have made me or prepared me more than any book I read, any academic study that I've accomplished over these 27 calendar years. So what I think that new will that you're talking about is allowing people to have skin in the game. When we talk about faculty coming to the inside, when we talk about students coming to the inside, that right there, you making sure that even though we might say that we honor and we recognize someone's humanity, that's making it real. So what I'm seeing now, wake of George Floyd and the awakening of the conscience of this nation, everyone now is being very vocal about social reform, justice reform. And that in of itself, and the tragedy of our good brother who lost his life unjustly, has wakened the conscience of so many people. So I'm looking at that will as you speak about that new will. It's more of an inner thing than an academic thing. And when you put the academic with that inner spirit that has been awakened, that has been alive, right? And then you put that in motion, then we bring about the change that we all are yearning for.
Thank you so much for that, Joel. I want to pose the same question to Maria. Maria, in your experience, even using your own story, do you have an example of how prison education programs have helped create the new will that movement needed to fight poverty and racial inequality?
Yes. So I fought my case prior to me actually going to prison. I sat in Cook County Jail in Chicago for 6 years fighting my case. And, you know, throughout that time, I met a lot of correctional officers, faculty from school, Safer Foundation, who provides GED, I tutored and stuff like that. And, you know, it was just crazy how prior to George Floyd and all the movements that have been going on, you know, you have people, you have humans that work in these institutions and that are so limited and so restricted and face the fear of how they interact with, you know, somebody that's fighting, you know, a case and that, you know, that's an inmate. Now fast forward, and I met a lot of great people, a great support team. I mean, people that went against the odds and against you know, their job description and the rules, what's allowed and not allowed for education to be better, you know, the fight. Now fast forward to prison, we have Northwestern. I mean, in Illinois, Northwestern is, you know, it's not this college, it's not this other community college, is you have Northwestern, hey, you're not an inmate, you know, that gap does not exist no more. So one of my experiences just yesterday was one of our higher education colleges that provides higher education in the prison systems. We went to the clemencies of 7 brothers and 1 sister. And you're talking about faculty, you're talking about students that are in and out also in the program. And we're sitting there shifting between rooms where we're listening to hearings, to clemency hearings of 7 men who have life terms, longer terms, and they're the students' relatives, family, mothers, fathers, people who, you know, might not have met this person yet or have met them through these same channels, and it now means something. You know, it's bringing people together. It's closing the division. You know, it's and I know we still have a lot of work to do with it, but it's happening. And it wasn't happening 30 years ago. It wasn't happening 20 years ago. And we're running around and people are advocating ministry service. It was just like so deep. I was so overwhelmed. I was just so happy and in tears that even the PRB was looking and praising this university that, you know, is providing reentry, is providing, hey, they won't have to worry about housing, they won't have to worry about this. And I think that helps fight poverty. It's an inmate that'll come out and is not going to have to worry about housing, it's not going to have to worry about education, mental health, insurance, medical insurance, dental, things like that, clothing, you know, and there's still other things that, you know, we go through and that we'll still have to, you know, face and go through our challenges. But it feels good to know that there is a larger support team of people who don't even know you, you know, who see you as somebody else. They don't see that crime. They don't see that background. They don't see nothing. They see what you have done to reform yourself and that you deserve a welcome home, you know, not coming out broke, not coming out uneducated, unemployed, you know, just walking out.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. I want to pose the same question to Yusuf. In your experience when using your own story, do you have an example of how prison education programs have helped create the new will, the movement needed to fight poverty and racial inequality?
Right, thank you so much. That's a wonderful question. I think with regards to that question, the thing that comes to my mind is how helpful it is for somebody who's incarcerated to understand the historical and political context as to why someone ends up in this situation in the first place, right? Because I think a lot of people get incarcerated and they don't really understand the history behind like the 1994 crime bill, the war on drugs, the Kerner Commission report that we're here about today, the Moynihan report, and on different things that happen. And so we kind of end up in this situation, and I think there's a big focus when it comes to being incarcerated, and a lot of the programs that they have for us, not necessarily the justice education programs, but the older type of programs will focus more on remorse and accountability, right? And so in my opinion, what that does is it kind of builds up this sense of self-deprecation, right? I'm really, there's something wrong with me, and I need to change, or I'm hopeless, and all of this type of stuff, right? But what happened with me and a lot of people that I know is that I started college and I took a lot of sociology classes, American social problems type of classes, and I start to learn that there's a system in place and there's a lot of blame to be shared, and there's a lot of situations and things like that that happened that led me to this point. And so it takes a little bit of the onus off of me, and helps me to be free to kind of think and imagine more now, because I'm not burdened with this idea that I'm a defective person, and that Black and brown people come to prison because there's something inherently wrong with me, right? And so once you get equipped with this information, and you understand that there's actually systems in place, and this isn't a conspiracy theory or anything like that. There's like PhD professors, and there's textbooks written on all of these horrible things that have happened systematically, right, to create systems like this. Then it just really does a lot, I think, to free people to think and to achieve the things that they want to achieve, because they realize that it's not as much their fault as they might have been led to believe. So yeah, that's how I believe that institutions of higher education, for me specifically, and people that I've met, how it helps to create that new will.
Thank you so much for that, Yusuf. And I want to turn this question also to Skye. In your experience, even using your own story, do you have how prison education programs have helped create the new will, that movement needed to fight poverty and racial inequality?
Yeah, so this would be a two-part for me. So first, there's what my experience on the inside has been, and what I've sort of derived from that in terms of answering a question about, what are the things that impacted me as a student of Cornell or a student of Bard College in a way that really translated into my life now here as a person free from the confines of prison. The second part will be me talking about what role I'm actually out here playing, which I think is really profound and important to think about what products are created by such an effort. And it's really important for those testimonies as well. I first want to acknowledge that, Joelle, I had no idea that you were inside. And when you've delineated the circumstances that under which you've been allowed, I see this false screen behind you. I see you dressed up, and you're one step away. You're one step away at many layers, and there's force behind that. There's momentum there, and so like you'll be here. Like, wow, that's amazing. And then to you too, Yusuf, is that I see where you are, and when I say that I used to be in programs where there was just one class a whole semester with no credit, and look where you are. Look where you are. Look what's happening. Like, this is just a thing that would just never have happened 15 years ago. It just was never even possible. It was laughable, right? So the institutions of higher education are already operating and doing some things that are significant, right? But that doesn't mean that there's a steady stasis, there's an equilibrium that has been met, because it hasn't. Because to Yusef's point, we're talking about coming into focus through our education about some of the historical wrongs that have done, understanding the institutional harms at a more nuanced layer, such that even my own behavior out here that's untethered and harming my own community has context with it, right? It's not just about a book and reading Thoreau or the Hobbes or the philosophers or Nietzsche. It's about education that actually enlightens me, takes the lenses off, take the blinders off, so that I can see how I'm existing in the world in a way that translates and motivates me to change. And this is back to what we're all saying, from Maria to Joel to Yusef to myself. As people impacted by this system, we're here universally singing like a choir that what we need is our humanity recognized. Not just the book, but to that this book is being offered to a human being who has a story, who has a life, and who has a process. And that process has an institutional mechanism attached to it that also needs to be addressed. And so if institution wants to come in, you're not at liberty, institutions of higher education, to just come in and give me a book. Not in the confines of this place, not in the face of a system doing this sort of harm. If you want to come in and offer me a book, you also recognize and see me, right? And so that's just that part. And I want to say that, like, here I am now out here on the other side. I'm a part of an organization called Galaxy Gives. Galaxy Gives is the philanthropic arm of Galaxy Digital, which is just a tech company, which is like the farthest thing from wanting to make change through social justice for poverty and for racism, right? How did we get there? How did I make it there? How did that leap happen and occur? It happened because most change isn't a direct path of change. We don't directly deal with poverty. We don't directly deal with racism. We indirectly deal with human beings, and these things are collateral benefits of just caring about people, right? And so to the extent that an institution can set up the paradigm that education, as well as circumstances like Yusef is saying, students come in, they tutor, that interaction with professors, the spaces created where there's intimacy and confidentiality, all those things create momentum, and again, in the right direction. But I'm doing this work now that's decarcerative work, that's abolition work, and the tech company, the philanthropy, they're consulting with us, they're speaking to us, they're giving us positions, because we've been prepared through education, as well as our own motivations and our own inspiration to take what's being granted to us through these institutions and do something with it. But the institution, with its institutional power, as again, I want to say, they have a particular power that no individual could have, and that has to be utilized and leaned in on in a way that has yet to be done. And so there's a call right now in this call. In this call, there's a call for the institutions to let their weight be felt by this broken system. That's it.
Thank you so much for that, Skye. That really does lead into our next question, which is, how should prison education programs be interacting with the community and other institutions to create the new will, to push for change that we need, not only within these systems, but really in our nation? And this question is open to anyone who would like to answer it.
Well, I would like to start by saying I have a daughter that's in college, and she had her struggles having a mother, an incarcerated mother. But one thing, we would talk, and I taught her how to use the resources out there to use my incarceration as a benefit to her. And she was able to go to her financial advisors, file independency because she had an incarcerated mother. They helped her with healing trauma. They helped her, within her grants, because she is an AP student, get, medical insurance, things like that. She's now in her senior year. And I thought that's great, and so in the questions with what needs to be done that isn't being done with these institutions is the same concept. It's great we're getting higher education accredited classes and things like that, but there is still mental health, trauma, healing, restorative justice, reintegration. Again, I go back to that because, as my brother Joel says, hey, it should start with no incarceration, if we can start it there. But seeing that we are where we are at now, you know, education in the universities on campus is not just education. It is, again, there's avenues for people who are struggling with their education or struggling with emotions, things like that, and mental health. Again, and those are struggles we also have in the prison system, you know, and it becomes divided. You're either the strong one or you're either the one that needs, you know, mental help, healing, things like that. So like, you know, there were moments of weakness that, you know, I had been behind the walls, but I never seek psychiatric help because, again, then, you know, then you're over here, not over there, you know. Then that influences on the privileges. Like Joel says, I had it about as easy as I had. I didn't need supervision. I was one of, in the state of Illinois, we only have 2 female prisons. I was in the larger one, but I was one of 7 women in a population of about 1,700 that was allowed outside the fence line without any supervision. But again, if I had a moment of weakness, that's, you know, gone. And in schooling and universities, they provide these type of assistance to help students thrive and channel their emotions, seek help, not fall down, you know, the drain. And I think that's one of the things that universities should look into, you know, holistic healing, yoga. You know, I know they're coming in and we're talking textbooks and things like that, but there's also, you know, what's inside, what we're still going through, our trauma, you know, dealing with our victims, you know, and all of that, our families, all of that good stuff, you know. Like for my daughter, I had to put a strong front so she could be a strong front for herself. But you hang up that phone and it's like, you know, you have to go, you have to go somewhere. And if we're going to be a part of this, we have to be a part of all of this. Also, yes, encouraging us, you know, to be strong and help work these models or readjust these existing models, as Skye has said, for the people that are coming behind us, you know. Like Skye has said before, and we all have said, we would have never seen this 15, 20, 30 years ago. There was a joke, it was laughing, you know, but we are here now, you know. And if we have the opportunity to come out and do something and assist these institutions and these systems in making it better, you know, for those that follow behind us, hey, you know, why not?
Thank you so much for that, Maria. And I do believe that we need to figure out a way to combine education with some of these trauma-informed programs that you are speaking of. I want to ask any other panelists that would like to respond to this question: how should prison education programs be interacting with the community and other institutions to create the new will to push for the change we need in our nation and in these institutions?
Yeah, just briefly, I'll make this brief in that when you think about putting stress, if you're someone who has the task of breaking up a big rock, a big boulder, of course, if you have this one instrument, that instrument, you can only strike one place at a time and create enough stress in that space, repeated strike after strike, to get fractured, right? But again, that's an individual man or a woman working. And my point to institutions is that the institutions have much more sources to create stresses on breaking up this boulder, to creating stress points and fractures. And so the many ways that an institution can think, and like we're talking about some of our best and brightest youth and young adults coming into the space of a university, our best and our brightest in terms of professor in the space of a university. You know, our best and brightest is people who just come through to be service people in the public space. Our judges, our firefighters, our police officers, our best and brightest are coming through universities. There's no shortageness of ideas in a university, right? And so the institution has a responsibility. If you're going to do this work of changing an institution that historically, from the inception of this land, from the inception of this idea of constitution, has been utilized in a way that hasn't been doing justice to its citizenship. If you want to make change at that level, you bring to bear all your resources as well. not just the book, again, that your institution has allowed the abilities, right? And so that stress, those factors that I'm referring to are in creating spaces where individuals, the humans, beings inside the wall and the human beings outside the wall, not just the student, but the civilian, the everyday person, can have an opportunity to come in and engage and be a part of that program. Because that's a sort of thing that this institution can't hold back the wave of. We have to be doing stuff that is overwhelming to an institution this big, right? And so finding as many ways that we can integrate these two, the people inside and in this community outside, is the task. How to do that? I say leave it to all the brilliant minds there. There's no shortage. You don't need it from this mind. You're there in plenty. So that's it.
Thank you so much for that, Skye. And I do wholeheartedly agree with that. You know, prisons exist not to just keep folks inside, but they also exist to keep those of us who want to do the work in those spaces out as well. So I thank you all. We are at time, but this is such an amazing conversation that's happening. I want to give the folks that have joined us an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have of our panelists. If you do have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, I don't see anyone has unmuted themselves. So what I would like to do is pass it over to my panelists to have a final word. What is it that you would like the folks that are tuning in today to know about prison education, ways that we can build the system, ways that we can work together to create the things that we know are working? And any of my panelists can start us off.
I'll start since my colleagues have already spoken on the last question you presented us with. I also want to just take a moment to really thank Skye, remarkable transformation. And I'm so impressed by everything you underwent. You definitely inspiration, Maria, mi hermana. I'm just thankful for what you're doing, and keep up the good work. I was so in tune with your story. So it was hitting home with me and you, Seth. Keep your head up. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Better days are ahead. As it relates to what the previous question did the sign off, education works. It works. But as my good brother Scott said and repeatedly in this call here, we just don't want your books. My good friend Mark Howard, Professor Mark Howard of Georgetown University, he has a Frederick Douglass program, which he brings in community members inside and along with his classmates, with students on the outside. These community members, not only have they come in the inside, but they also have come inside of our YME community, which is AE, I can also call it the unit, where people are housed at. What we did here, we created a therapeutic environment. In this therapeutic environment, we're allowing people from the outside to have direct contact with people on the inside, which allowing my younger mentees to think, as I stated earlier, as citizens. That right there is so powerful, to have us thinking like citizens, taking our education, which allows us to think better and be able to express ourselves, because we know how important public speaking is. We have public speaking class on the inside for my young guys, they can build confidence in themselves, right? That's the education piece, but more importantly, that humanity piece. And finally, I want to say this again, and reiterate this over and over again. No entry triumphs re-entry. No entry triumphs re-entry. We have to turn off the faucet so we can take all these resources that these collegiate institutions have and do an investment on the front end. We got to do what college was designed for students to go to college and not to prison. That's the bad side. We come to prison and not to college. So we can get on the front end and do an investment there. It doesn't have to be a big, elaborate institution. It can be something that's quaint and provide all the resources. Because think of what we're doing on the inside. I'm gonna say this here, I'm be quiet here. On the inside, look what you said in the background. They converted a room and made it a learning center. Why we can't take a small establishment and do the same thing in the community and allow these young folks that have the mentorship from individuals such as everyone in the panel will be just informed people who have buy-in with them to encourage them to stay on the process that they can go to college and not to prison. No entry trumps re-entry. I want to make sure that that is loud and clear. And I think universities should really get behind that in addition to what we're talking about today. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Joel. Closing remarks, Maria.
First, to my fellow brother panelists, Joel, Yusef, Skye, it's been great talking and collaborating with you guys on this. And I thank the Eisenhower Foundation and the Mellon Foundation, as well as Northwestern University, for this opportunity they have given me to be ambassador for them and the opportunity for that higher education. It has, as a female, as a single mother, it has empowered me to not look at the past, but strive for the future.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. We truly appreciate having you. Final remarks, Yusef.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you to the panelists. I really appreciate you guys showing up and everything that you had to say. Skye, Maria, and Joel, you guys have all been very impressive and very inspirational for me. So thank you so much. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that I feel like the new will is here. We're experiencing it right now. Like some other people had said, like this is stuff that was laughable 10, 15 years ago, and I'm always doing the work. I'm trying to encourage people and make people aware of the fact, because a lot of times people are incarcerated and they don't even realize how much support that they have out there and how much things are changing in the political sphere with regard to prison education and prison reform and those sorts of things. And so, yeah, I think that, with the advent of smartphones and social media and all this conscience raising and everything like that, we're well on our way. And I'm just really appreciating it and this opportunity right here. And but also, I wanted to say that I think part of the equation is peace officers, correctional officers, and things like that. And it's difficult to get an education while you're in prison. When I still have to live in here, right? And so many of the correctional officers, prison guards, and things like that, they come from the same communities. It's more and more correctional officers who are Black and brown folks who don't have an education and came from the same poor public schools and stuff like that. And I really believe in education. I think education should be for everybody. And so I just think that these institutions of higher education, hopefully we can start also targeting these correctional officers and the people who work inside these institutions as far as targeting them for education. Not necessarily, I think the language and like requiring maybe a little bit forceful, but encouraging people to get an education, a liberal education, so that, and I think that would help, the whole situation. And that's just a part of this community that we're talking about that oftentimes gets left out, because sometimes we work with an idea of like an adversarial relationship or like they're the opposition or something like that. But if everybody can be educated, then we'll all be so much better for us. So I just want to add that. And again, thank everybody for being here.
Thank you so much for that. And finally, Skye, your closing remarks.
Okay, yeah. So again, thanks to the Kerner Commission, the the idea of bringing this panel together, the foundations who made it possible, the programs that are inside of institutions, Cornell, Northwestern, the different Georgetown, as well as yours, Tyree, and because I don't remember the name, I'm sorry. It's just, all institutions doing work inside. The effort that you are making is relevant. It is significant. Yet we're here today having a conversation about what else can be done. That doesn't mean that we're not grateful for what exists, right? This doesn't mean that what exists isn't very essential, because in fact it is. And, again, to my fellow panelists, Maria, sorry you're the only lady, but, each sister shows up and represents, and you definitely did. And Joe, That's right. To Joel, to Noah, as well as you, Tyree. Thank you for this opportunity. Thanks for having this exchange, being a part of this conversation. My final thought would just to really, I want to support what Noah says. I want to raise up from the inside what's happening right now from the inside as to what is a priority. The truth is that when incarcerated people are released, our priorities are forced to shift. As much as we want to still be connected to those inside, our lives aren't inside anymore. We have to, we have families, we have futures, we have a life to put back together that is a life of contributing. And we have to get busy to doing that task. And so this is about the lives of the people still caught in the net of that system. And so I really want to rise up what Noah was saying, because it does have an experience that I share too, brother, is that this system isn't just harming people from poor minority communities. The people who work in that system are also being harmed. And Maria gave a slight testimony to this as well. The teachers, the medical providers, the correctional officers, they're being restrained in their own basic humanity. It's an unspoken rule about how to interact with incarcerated people. And when you step outside of that and be the human being that you are, you're often reproached by that, by a culture in prison that's not reforming anybody. It's not making anybody a better person. It's not revealing our best sides. And so I just want to ditto that the institution of higher education by offering what it does. You're playing to your strength. In essence, educating people, right? And can you add to that roster these other variables that are within a system that when you change their hearts, when you give them greater opportunity, watch how much profound the impact that translates for a system that, again, is only maintaining its own power, only projecting its own power, and only invested in its own power. Empower the people in it, and we'll get some change. So I just want to end with that, and thank you all.
Thank you so much. I think what this conversation has shown us is the importance of ensuring that when we are having these conversations, that the lived experiences of those that have been impacted by the criminal legal system is heard, right? Is heard from the mountaintops, because the reality is we do not have very many spaces where the voices of folks that are system impacted can be heard. So I truly want to thank my panelists for their amazing insights. I also would like to thank the Justice Education Initiative at the Claremont Colleges, the Prison Education Programs at Cornell and Georgetown Universities, and the Northwestern Prison Education Program. Finally, I would like to thank the Eisenhower and Mellon Foundations for sponsoring this amazing event. My hopes is that we continue these conversations. And once again, I'd like to thank our panelists, especially those that are still trapped inside. We see you, we hear you, we love you, we're out here fighting for you. So thank you so much. And thank you all to joining us. We couldn't do this work without all of you. I see several of our Claremont faculty on. Thank you all so much for your support. Nigel Boyle, who has been instrumental in our Inside Out program at the Claremont Colleges. Thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Alan Curtis, and thank you so much to Leela for all of your work. Finally, our behind the scenes person, Yoon Hee, you are absolutely amazing. We couldn't do this without you, so thank you as well. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.